My name is Matthew Carey. I'm from the University of Copenhagen, and I'm going to be, what's the English term for this? I'm the moderator, a chair of this thing. I just wanted to say it was extremely courageous of the organizers to try to squeeze in so many papers in a conference which is devoted to the Mediterranean. And so I think that my job here is to bring some Northern European rigor, because we're already 35 minutes late. So you have exactly 20 minutes to speak. When you have only 5 minutes left, you get a piece of paper saying 5 minutes. When you have one left, it says 1. And when it's over, I cut the microphone. Okay?
No,
So, without further ado.
Hello, I'll be very fast, then I'll try to go right to the point. And probably will simplify quite a lot the concepts and terms I'll be using, but we will be able to expand on explanations after, I hope. Just briefly to say in Spanish, que agradezco mucho estar aquí por una razón particular, porque yo, aunque a los 3 años me fui, he nacido en Vitoria, soy hijo de la ciudad, y bueno, mi madre me traía a la Facultad de Letras en brazos cuando era bebé y con sus amigas y sus compañeros, que ahora algunos de ellos son profesores. En la universidad me han dicho que aparecerían igual por la conferencia, si hay alguno de ellos, de los amigos de mi madre, en el público, estaría encantado de conoceros. Bueno, paso al... I pass to the intellectual aspect. Yes, well, I was going to do it right now. My name is Pablo Domínguez. I'm coming from Center of Biological and Cultural Diversity of the School of Anthropology and Conservation in Kent University in England. I doctorated in Paris in the UPVEHU SS under Anne-Marie Brisbar supervision and Montserrat Ventura from the Autonomous University of Barcelona, co-supervised by Mohamed Mehdi from l'École Nationale d'Agriculture de Meknes. And I have worked in the High Atlas Mountains, particularly in the Yagur region, the Messiua tribe. I'm today going to speak about processes of cultural, economical globalization, and how this links with religious beliefs in the highlands of the Atlas, and how also these shifts link to nature management, local management by local populations in the Messiua tribe. So just to quickly give some theoretical framework on what I work on, I'm concentrated on the commons. This means community-based management of natural resources. This is resources or territories owned communally by a group. In the case of Morocco, we usually speak of tribes or tribal groups, fractions, tribal fractions. So basically, communally owned resources that are managed collectively. And after Hardin's work, basically, to summarize his tragedy of the commons, his critique on the commons when he equalized it to open access management to natural resources, how this depleted the common pool of resources, was severely criticized during the next decades, and drove to certain works that here I just put 3 basic main ones that have driven my own works: Ostrom's, Burke's, and Agrawal, defending in different ways with many other authors that can't appear here, the interest, in fact, of the commons for protecting, conserving the environment and supporting local livelihoods in certain conditions that they define in different ways. But basically to say that the commons is not a tragedy, but it can be, in fact, a benefit for the environment and the local populations and for human development, future programs of sustainable development, and others. So I place myself within this theoretical framework, studied all around the globe, the commons, and to apply it particularly in the case of the most paradigmatic common system in Morocco and the Maghreb, which is the AGDAL. We can define it as a Maghrebian institution for managing commonly held territory or resource, and even if it has many different ways of manifesting, of managing the resources depending on what type of research we're talking about, we can kind of summarize it in the idea of prohibiting the extraction of the resource that is commonly owned during a certain period of time in order to permit this resource to grow in its moments of critical development. For example, in spring, a pasture. You don't let people in with their animals, and the pasture can, in April, for example, and then you can let the pastures grow exponentially in a moment where the potential can be maximized. And this is always agreed through a tribal assembly, collectively, by the users of the resource themselves. So it's an endogenous system managed by locals that are the users of the resource managed. Basically, the idea that I was exposing just a minute ago on the pastures, prohibition, the grazing prohibition on the pastures would be symbolized by this diagram that I just drew by hand, where I tried to show how by putting the AGDAL herding prohibition between February and July or August, we let the grass grow. This is the level of fodder resource that we would have in a certain territory, and I hypothesized down here the levels of production of that grass if the AGDAL herding prohibition did not exist. So basically, you're maximizing your production of natural resources. That would be the prohibition of the AGDAL. The AGDAL is much more broad than this. I just have 20 minutes, but there's many. I have a thesis written about the AGDAL of Yagur, and as we will see here, has many cultural connotations, ritual, socioeconomic, ecological. I will try to kind of summarize a little bit the environmental, social aspects to end up on the religiosity of the AGDAL. So just to shortly comment here how it can affect many different resources, I was basically focused on pastoral semi-nomads, transhumant herders, and thus on extensive pastoralism in grasslands like these that you can see on this photo on the right. But it also can affect the management of algae in the coast of Essaouira, or little patches of water artificially irrigated, grain. This is a cemetery, so you see that it's prohibited. All these resources are in fact managed through the AGDAL institution. This is a community of users that decides dates where they prohibit the access to that resource to maximize its production. And then here it's a very quite graphic image of what an AGDAL would be, a closed territory or a delimited territory where herding is not permitted. And then vegetation grows much more intensely than in the neighboring parts, as you can see out of this. This is a cemetery. Concretely, this is a cemetery where it's forbidden, AGDAL cemetery, where it's forbidden to extract any resources all year round. In this case, the contrast is even stronger. But basically, it summarizes the spirit of AGDAL. So you can see also here on this other picture where extraction is only permitted some months a year. There is a contrast of vegetation production between the end of the AGDAL and the other, and the same around. Down here you see this forest is also managed through the AGDAL, and you see how in the neighboring land there's no vegetation. Basically, it's a way to manage the space, the natural resources, the territory, in the benefit of local communities and local users. The AGDAL term exists very widely throughout the North Africa. Here I delimited the Berber-speaking area. Basically, we associate the word AGDAL to a Berber or Amazigh origin. But a lot of, studies on the etymology of this concept and epistemology of the concept of AGDAL are more than welcome. I think there's a lot to do. And this is just a quick diagram to explain that, well, we find the word all the way south to the Ogar. In Tunisia, the management, not only the word, but the management, AGDAL I just described, in Morocco where I worked, and all the way up to the Mediterranean, so from the Atlantic to the Ogar, to the Kabylia in Mediterranean and Tunisia near Libya, to explain that this concept of AGDAL, the importance that it has within the Maghrebian and particularly within the Amazigh societies. So at an ecological level, just a quick overview. This is not a conference of environment, just some notions. Quickly to say that me or other colleagues of the AGDAL program where I developed my PhD and we all learned together on the AGDAL. We found, in this case, Safia Alawi, my colleague from Marrakesh University, how through this prohibition, we permit certain plants to develop, those that are most interesting for herders. So they put the opening of the access to the pastures in a certain date to get the plants that they are most interested on, and thus protecting a certain number and type of species. So the interest on biodiversity conservation is evident. Also on biomass production and vegetational cover that conserves the soils, and it's interesting environmentally speaking, where we can see an area in red conserved by the AGDAL and managed by the AGDAL, and an area managed by not by the AGDAL, where the vegetational cover is higher in different dates of the year, but always higher in the AGDAL area, so protecting the soils. Also, more species were found in the AGDAL areas than in non-AGDAL areas in biophysical similar conditions. This is a diagram where you see a diversity of AGDAL. So you have fruit AGDALs, you have meaning that you restrict the access to a certain space or certain group of trees at a certain time of the year, or to cereals, or to water, or to grain. And then you're managing the territory diversified manner, which can only give a diversified result of species and ecological niches within the territory, hence enriching the diversity of habitats and species and genetics of a region. Okay, that just quickly to speak about the environmental benefits of the AGDAL that we have been able to identify up to present. At a social level, I'll summarize saying that basically the AGDAL permits more just access or equal access to local natural resources than many modern privatized management models, as the community has equal rights in the common pool and decides together its management rules. And these management rules are going to be always according to the interest of the community's majority. So it's always a majority of the local assembly of users that's going to decide how are we going to manage this space, which rules, which dates, which species are we going to protect, which ones are we not going to protect, and always in the benefit of the community's majority. Hence the strong egalitarian spirit of mountain societies described so long ago, even idealized by Montaigne and other anthropologists, is in the AGDAL very well reflected. Just to show a little tip, they adapt the opening of the Yagur where I most worked. They adapt the opening according to the quantity of rain that they receive throughout the year, and that basically is related to their needs in fodder for their animals. And they can move the date, as you can see here, all the way from half June to the half July, according to the pluviometry. Every year they move the date, and they adapt it to the needs of the majority of the community. Quickly to show where I worked, the Aitikis in the Messiua tribe in the High Atlas Mountains of Marrakesh within Morocco. This is a closer shot of the Messiua tribe. As you can see, a big tribe within the other neighboring tribes of the High Atlas. This is the Yagur, the central area where they worked, the fractions around it, the people. I just got 5 minutes, so the landscapes where I've been working for 10 years. I've done several years in and out, going in and out in an intermittent manner, up to a year of fieldwork. And basically I wanted just to quickly give an overview of the local religiosity related to the AGDAL system, where, well, this I'll pass it because it's, well, general concepts of religiosity within the Maghreb, just to say basically that each AGDAL and the Yagur has a saint patron, has a protector, we can say, of the territory and even the rule and the prohibition on that space that is sacralized through the ritual of, we can simplify the whole ethnography into the ritualization of the sacredness of the AGDAL prohibition in a mahruf, which is the sacrifice of an animal in front of the saint tomb, and where the descendants of the saint, of the buried saint, are after shared between all the community of users in a redistributive manner, where the rich maybe give more, but at the end everybody gets back the same, and such a jest in front of the eyes of the saint and God, as the saint's tomb is conceived as a gateway to Allah, permits to receive the baraka from the saint for a good year pasture after the opening. And this ritual is usually done just before or just after the opening of the AGDAL. Thus, in this manner, there's a reinforcement of the collectivity and the AGDAL prohibition through this sacralization. This is seen in many AGDALs throughout Morocco. I didn't have time maybe to mention it, but the abundance of AGDALs, of communal management systems throughout the Maghreb is really very dense, and we can be speaking of almost 500,000 AGDALs within the whole of the Maghreb. And generally, each of these commonly owned spaces or natural resource managed through this prohibition rule, where we prohibit some months of extraction of wood or some months of extraction of grass or fruits. We usually accompany this prohibition with the presence of a saint, which here, from the work of Taiki from Tetuan University, I show a little bit the association between these mausoleums that I guess, you know, I didn't have time to develop here in this short time, but you probably most are familiar with the Maraboutic constructions. So the tomb of a saint, accompanying usually this AGDAL areas with trees. As you see, this would be an AGDAL, forest AGDAL. Is very important throughout all Morocco. In the Yagur where I worked, the presence of a religious element is very intense, not only indicated by the presence of a mausoleum of a saint, but of a rock where a saint sat down and had a story that locally has a particular meaning, or a ritual, or some unexplainable events took place, etc. And through my fieldwork, even if all the territory is fulfilled with in a certain religious references, I found, or I felt, that it was particularly intense in the AGDAL areas. Basically, and this I'm arriving to the end very fast, as I said, 1 minute left. There's a diminution of the saints' belief after the especially after the 1970s, 80s. With inquiries that I undertook, it appeared that especially took off in this time. And basically, the saints and the cosmologies related to them have been greatly undermined, particularly by the advance of a more orthodox or this reinvention or reformulation of Islam that Professor Rashid was speaking to us about before, that slowly, well, entering in the Maghreb and up, climbing up the mountains, where the saints are seen as anti-Islamic, but of course also along with other elements of globalization, of mass media, of westernization of the Maghreb and Mediterranean societies. The old opening of the date of the Yagur, which was the 28th of July, and was announced by the saints' descendants, has disappeared because nor the descendants of the saints are respected as they were before, nor the date is respected. Even the rule is starting to not be, it seems to be increasingly less respected, and in general, it tends to be opened earlier every year. So the AGDAL prohibition is being reduced slowly, first by taking out the saints and the sacralization of the rule, and slowly later by putting aside the old date, and now through its cultivation of the territory, which before was pastoral. So there's an acceleration of the cultivation. There's basically I've been following a 1 century long process of undermining of the AGDAL from a cultural point of view, an agroeconomical point of view. And basically this is the evolution of the agriculture within an area before managed by the AGDAL. It's being increasingly cultivated. The AGDAL is losing its meaning, and through this process it's also participating to the undermining of the old management, and what was old grasslands are becoming, this is 2,200 meters high, usually was not very apt for agriculture. So there's other elements of this process, not just, of course, the cosmological shift, not at all, but it makes part of a set of drivers of change, which I would define as demographic growth. With the growth of populations, there's a need of more resources, so they go to that is most at hand, this pastoral area, at the top of their mountain. Market economy integration, I can't go in detail, I got some articles published on this, but the demand of red meat and the Sardi races, which are relatively new locally, are demanding higher production of meat, and then changing the production. They're not so pastoral, but more needed of grain, so agriculture expands also to feed this new race, to feed the growing population and tourism of Marrakesh and nearby areas. Climate change would be also one possibility, as locals mention it, and how now it's easier to cultivate in highland areas because there's less snow than before, it's warmer than before. The new participation of the state and transformation in the socio-political structures, so the emptying of power local communities, where the Jma, the assembly that decided on the AGDAL, is each time increasingly weaker in the final decisions, and the Qaid and the ministry decides now increasingly more the final management of the pastures, the emergence of tourism, and the religious shift that I've explained. All this set of causes make a system and help us understand this transformation. And then the thing I want just to, as conclusion, to bring up here and to try to work on, of course, is something related with the defense of the AGDAL that I have lived near to and understood as a beneficial system for the ecosystems, economically sustainable, full of potential for human economical development, and that is being passing invisibilized, and it could be promoted as a socio-culturally resilient heritage, promoted as a patrimony. It has proved, I think it's very important to understand that through the centuries, and we're speaking about several centuries old systems, have proved to be a central element of environmental conservation and an adaptive, sustainable livelihood system that should, just by that long history, should explain us at least part of its importance and relevance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If we have